The boy everyone once called a failure. The same boy who would one day rise higher than anyone ever imagined. His name was Ethan Cole. Ethan grew up in a small quiet neighborhood on the edge of the city, where broken sidewalks and flickering streetlights told stories of struggle. His mother, Maria Cole, worked long hours as a cleaner in a corporate office building, an enormous glass tower that seemed to touch the sky. Ethan had never seen the inside of it, but he had heard about it countless times. His mother would describe the shining floors, the powerful people, the expensive suits, and how small she felt walking through those halls. His father had left when Ethan was just 6. No explanation, no goodbye, just silence. Since then it was only Ethan and Maria against the world. Ethan wasn't like the other kids. He struggled in school, numbers confused him, words slipped from his mind, and no matter how hard he tried, he always seemed to fall behind. His teachers labeled him as slow. His classmates weren't as kind. Failure, they would whisper, sometimes louder. One afternoon, as Ethan stood in front of the class trying to read a passage, his voice trembling, the words refused to come out right. Laughter filled the room. "Sit down, Ethan," the teacher said with a sigh. "You're not even trying." But he was trying. He always was. That evening, Ethan sat quietly at the dinner table, pushing his food around his plate. Maria noticed. "What happened today?" she asked gently. "Nothing," Ethan replied, not looking up. Maria reached across the table, placing her hand over his. "You don't have to hide your pain from me." Ethan's eyes filled with tears. "They all think I'm stupid," he whispered. Maybe they're right." Maria's expression softened, but her voice was firm. "No, you listen to me, Ethan Cole," she said. "You are not a failure. The world just hasn't seen your strength yet." Her words stayed with him, even when the world continued to prove otherwise. Years passed, but nothing changed. Ethan barely graduated high school. No college accepted him. Every job application he submitted was rejected, not qualified, insufficient skills, lack of experience. Each rejection felt heavier than the last. Eventually, out of desperation, Ethan followed in his mother's footsteps and applied for a janitor position at the same corporate building she worked in, Harrison Company, one of the most powerful companies in the city. He got the job. The first day he stepped inside that towering building, he felt it, the same feeling his mother had described, small, invisible. As he cleaned the floors late at night, he would watch the executives leave their offices, laughing, confident, successful. Among them was the CEO, Jonathan Harrison, a man known for his sharp mind and even sharper words. One night, as Ethan was mopping near the executive floor, Jonathan stopped in front of him. "You missed a spot," Jonathan said coldly. Ethan quickly wiped it. "I'm sorry, sir." Jonathan glanced at him briefly. "You people should at least try to do simple jobs properly." The words hit Ethan harder than any insult he had heard in school. "You people." He lowered his head and said nothing. But something inside him shifted that night. For the first time, Ethan didn't just feel pain, he felt fire. From that moment on, Ethan began to observe everything. While cleaning offices, he would pause and look at documents, charts, presentations left on desks. He didn't fully understand them at first, but he tried. Every night after his shift, he would go home and search online, teaching himself what those papers meant. Business terms, financial reports, market trends. He struggled, he failed. He started over again and again, but this time, he didn't stop. Months turned into years. Ethan changed. The boy who once couldn't read a paragraph without trembling was now studying entire reports late into the night. The same boy everyone called slow began to see patterns others missed. He started saving every penny he earned. No unnecessary expenses, no distractions. His mother noticed the change. "You're working too hard," Maria said one evening. "I have to," Ethan replied quietly. "I don't want to stay here forever." She smiled, though her eyes were filled with worry. "I know you won't." One night while cleaning the conference room, Ethan found a discarded proposal. It was about a small startup company that Harrison Company had rejected. "They said it wouldn't work," Ethan murmured. But something about it felt different. He took the papers home. For weeks he studied them, reworking the idea, improving it, building something new from something others had thrown away. With the little savings he had, Ethan took a risk. He invested. The beginning was brutal. Losses, mistakes, sleepless nights. There were moments he almost gave up, but he didn't, because every time doubt crept in, he remembered the laughter, the whispers, the word failure. And he refused to let that word define him. Slowly, something started to change. The investment grew, then doubled, then expanded beyond anything he had imagined. Years passed. Ethan was no longer the quiet janitor no one noticed. He became a businessman, a strategist, a name people started to recognize. Money came, more than he had ever dreamed of. But with it came something else, a quiet, burning purpose. One day, sitting in his office, Ethan looked at a familiar name on the screen, Harrison Company. The same company where he had once been invisible, the same company where he had been called, "you people." It was struggling now, bad decisions, declining profits, weak leadership, and for the first time, it was vulnerable. Ethan leaned back in his chair, his expression unreadable. "Is this destiny?" he whispered to himself. He picked up the phone. "I want to acquire Harrison Company," he said calmly. There was silence on the other end. "Sir, are you serious? That's a massive corporation." Ethan's voice didn't shake. "So am I." The process took months. Negotiations, legal battles, resistance from the board, but in the end, Ethan Cole won. The day he walked back into that glass building, everything felt different. The floors were the same, the walls were the same. But he wasn't. Employees lined the halls, whispering, curious about the new owner. And at the center of it all stood Jonathan Harrison, no longer the powerful CEO, but a man who had just lost everything. Their eyes met. For a moment, time seemed to stop. Jonathan stepped forward, trying to maintain his composure. "So, it's you," he said, his voice tight. Ethan looked at him calmly. "Yes, it's me." Jonathan let out a bitter laugh. "The janitor." Ethan didn't react. "I prefer owner," he replied quietly. Silence fell between them for the first time in his life. Ethan wasn't the one being looked down on. Jonathan swallowed, his pride cracking. "I suppose congratulations are in order." Ethan studied him for a moment. Then he said something that no one expected. "I remember what you said to me." Jonathan's expression shifted. Ethan stepped closer, his voice steady but heavy with emotion. "You said, you people should at least try." A long pause. "I did try." His words weren't loud, but they carried years of pain, struggle, and resilience. Jonathan had no response, because there was nothing left to say. Ethan walked past him, toward the office that once felt unreachable, the office that now belonged to him. But as he stood there looking out over the city, something unexpected filled his heart. Not pride, not revenge, but something deeper, something quieter. Because the boy who had been called a failure had never truly wanted to prove others wrong. He had only ever wanted to prove that he was enough, and now he finally knew he was. His hand rested gently on the desk as memories flooded back. His mother's voice, the laughter in the classroom, the long nights, the tears no one saw. Everything had led to this moment, but his journey wasn't over yet. Ethan stood there for a long time, staring out through the tall glass windows as the city moved below him. Cars like tiny streams of light, people rushing with places to be, dreams to chase, and burdens to carry. For a moment, everything was quiet, too quiet. Then a soft knock broke the silence. Ethan turned slightly. "Come in." The door opened slowly, and a woman stepped inside. She looked familiar, older now, her hair slightly grayer, her posture a little more tired, but Ethan would recognize her anywhere. It was his mother, Maria Cole. She paused at the entrance, her eyes scanning the room, almost as if she didn't believe she was allowed to be there. This is your office?" she asked softly. Ethan smiled faintly. "Yeah, it is." Maria stepped in slowly, her fingers brushing against the polished desk, the expensive furniture, the same thing she used to clean years ago. "I used to wipe this table every night," she whispered. "I never thought." Her voice cracked. Ethan walked toward her gently. "You never thought your son would own it?" He finished quietly. Maria looked at him, her eyes filling with tears. "I always knew you were meant for something bigger," she said. "I just didn't know the world would take so long to see it." Ethan felt something tighten in his chest. All those years, all that pain, and yet she had never doubted him, not even once. He reached out and held her hands. "We did this," he said softly, "not just me." Maria shook her head. "No, Ethan, you carried a weight no child should ever have to carry, and you never broke." There was silence between them, but it wasn't empty. It was full of everything they had survived together. After a moment, Ethan gently guided her toward the chair behind the desk. "Sit," he said. She hesitated. "I can't sit there." "Why not?" Maria gave a small, emotional smile. "Because I still feel like I'm supposed to clean it, not own it." Ethan pulled the chair back and looked at her with quiet determination. "You're not cleaning anything anymore." Slowly she sat down, and the moment she did, tears slipped down her face, not out of sadness, but because for the first time in her life she felt what it was like to rest. Ethan watched her, and something inside him shifted again. This was why he had fought so hard, not the money, not the power. But this moment, that same afternoon, Ethan called for a company-wide meeting. The news had already spread. Everyone knew the new owner was once a janitor in the same building. Whispers filled the hallways. Some were curious, some were skeptical, some didn't believe it at all. The conference hall was packed. Executives in expensive suits, employees in neat uniforms, people from every level of the company, and standing at the back, unnoticed by most, was Jonathan Harrison, watching, waiting. Ethan stepped onto the stage. The room slowly fell silent. For a few seconds he didn't speak. He just looked at the crowd. The same kind of people who once walked past him without even noticing he existed. "I know a lot of you are confused," he began, his voice calm but steady. "Some of you are wondering how someone like me ended up here." A faint murmur moved through the room. Ethan continued, "I used to clean these floors, late at night when most of you had already gone home." Now the room was completely silent. "I've heard the conversations in this building. I've seen how people are treated, depending on their position, their salary, their title." His eyes moved slowly across the crowd. "And I know what it feels like to be invisible." Those words landed heavily. Some employees lowered their gaze because deep down they knew. Ethan took a small breath. "But I didn't come here for revenge." At the back of the room, Jonathan's expression shifted slightly. "I didn't buy this company to prove anyone wrong," Ethan continued. "I bought it because I believe it can be better." There was something different in his tone now. Not anger, not pride, but purpose. "From today forward, things will change." People leaned in. "Every employee in this company, no matter their position, will be treated with respect." A pause. "No one here is just anything, not just a cleaner, not just an assistant, not just anything." The words echoed in the room. Ethan's voice softened slightly. "Because I was once that just person." In the back, Jonathan looked down. For the first time there was no arrogance left in his face, only reflection. Ethan continued, "We will rebuild this company, not just financially, but humanly." A quiet ripple of emotion spread across the audience. "This place will not only be successful, it will be fair." For a moment no one moved. Then slowly, someone began to clap, then another and another, until the entire room filled with applause, not forced, not polite, but real. After the meeting ended, people didn't rush out like usual. Many stayed behind, talking quietly, processing what they had just heard, because something had changed. Not just in leadership, but in atmosphere. Later that evening, as the building emptied, Ethan walked alone through the hallways. The same hallways he used to clean. His footsteps were slow, thoughtful. As he turned a corner, he saw someone standing near the windows. Jonathan Harrison. He didn't turn around when Ethan approached. "I stayed," Jonathan said quietly. "I wasn't sure why." Ethan stopped beside him. Neither of them spoke for a moment. Finally, Jonathan let out a long breath. "I built this company from nothing," he said. "I gave it everything, and still, I lost it." Ethan listened. "I used to think strength meant never showing weakness," Jonathan continued. "Never stopping, never looking back." He paused. "But I never looked down either." That sentence hung in the air, heavy, honest. Jonathan finally turned to face Ethan. "I remember you," he admitted. "Not clearly, but enough." Ethan's expression didn't change. "I said things I shouldn't have said." Silence, not defensive, not dismissive, just real. Ethan looked at him for a long moment. Then he spoke quietly. "You didn't ruin me." Jonathan blinked slightly. "You didn't define me," Ethan continued, "but you were part of the reason I refused to stay where I was." A long pause. "And for that, I don't hate you." Those words weren't easy, but they were true. Jonathan swallowed, something breaking behind his composed exterior. "I don't expect forgiveness," he said. Ethan nodded slightly. "Good," he replied, "because this isn't about forgiveness." Jonathan frowned slightly. "Then what is it about?" Ethan looked around the building, the walls, the floors, the life that once felt out of reach. "It's about what we do next." The air shifted again, because for the first time, this wasn't about the past anymore, and somewhere deep inside, both men knew that what came next would matter more than everything that had already happened. Jonathan held Ethan's gaze, searching for something, maybe judgment, maybe anger, but he found neither. "What we do next," Jonathan repeated quietly, almost to himself. "You really believe this place can change?" Ethan didn't answer immediately. He walked a few steps forward, his fingers brushing lightly against the glass wall, just like his mother had done earlier. His reflection stared back at him. No longer the uncertain boy, but not entirely free from him either. "It has to," Ethan finally said, "because if it doesn't, then everything I went through means nothing." Jonathan studied him carefully. "You think pain gives you clarity," Jonathan said. "Sometimes it just makes you bitter." Ethan gave a faint, almost tired smile. "It can," he admitted. "But it depends on what you choose to do with it." Silence settled between them again. For the first time in a long time, Jonathan Harrison had nothing to argue with. "I don't have a place here anymore," Jonathan said after a while. "Not as CEO, not as anything." Ethan turned slightly toward him. "That depends." Jonathan frowned. "On what?" "On whether you're willing to learn the same way I had to." Those words landed differently this time. Jonathan wasn't being challenged as a powerful man. He was being invited as a human being. You'd keep me here? Jonathan asked, almost disbelieving. Not in the position you had, Ethan said calmly. That version of leadership doesn't exist here anymore. Jonathan let out a quiet breath, something between relief and discomfort. And what would I be? Ethan looked at him directly. Someone who starts over. That word again, start over. Jonathan looked away, his jaw tightening slightly, for a man who had once controlled everything. The idea of starting over felt heavier than losing it all, but deep down, he knew he deserved nothing less. I'll think about it, he said quietly. Ethan nodded. That's more than enough for now. They stood there for a moment longer, then Ethan turned and walked away, leaving Jonathan alone with his thoughts, perhaps for the first time in years. The following weeks brought changes that no one in the company had ever experienced before. Ethan didn't rush. He observed. He listened. He walked through every department, not as a distant owner, but as someone who genuinely wanted to understand. He spoke to receptionists, security guards, assistants, cleaners, people who had never been asked for their opinions before. At first, they were hesitant, nervous, because they weren't used to being seen, but slowly, that began to change. Is everything okay with your work schedule? Ethan asked one evening as he stood beside a cleaner mopping the floor. The man looked up surprised. Yes, sir. Ethan smiled slightly. You don't have to call me sir. My name is Ethan. The man hesitated. Ethan, it felt strange on his tongue, but something about it felt right. Meanwhile, the executive struggled to adjust. Some resisted quietly, some openly questioned the new policies. Too much empathy weakens a company, one senior manager argued during a meeting. Ethan didn't raise his voice. It strengthens people, he replied, and strong people build strong companies. The room fell silent because, unlike before, these weren't just words, they were backed by someone who had lived both sides. One late evening, Ethan sat alone in his office reviewing reports. There was a soft knock. Come in. The door opened and a young woman stepped in, nervous, hesitant. Hi. I'm sorry to bother you, she said. Ethan looked up. It's okay, come in. My name is Lily Carter, she said, clutching a folder tightly. I work in data analysis. Ethan nodded. What's on your mind, Lily? She took a deep breath, then walked forward and placed the folder on his desk. I found something, she said. Ethan opened it. Charts, numbers, projections. His expression slowly changed. This division, he murmured. Yes, Lily said quickly. It's been losing money for months. But no one reported it properly. Why not? Lily hesitated. Because the person in charge doesn't like being questioned. Ethan leaned back slightly, processing. This wasn't just a financial issue. It was cultural, the old system, still hiding beneath the surface. You did the right thing bringing this to me, Ethan said. Lily looked surprised. I was scared, she admitted. I thought I might get in trouble. Ethan shook his head. Not here. Those two words meant more than any long speech. Lily exhaled, some of the fear leaving her shoulders. Thank you, she said quietly. As she turned to leave, Ethan spoke again. Lily. She stopped. Yes? Don't wait next time, he said. Your voice matters. For a second she just stood there, then she nodded, and walked out with a little more confidence than she had walked in with. The next day Ethan called for a closed-door meeting. The manager responsible for the failing division sat across from him, visibly tense. I wasn't aware of the full situation, the manager said quickly. The reports were incomplete. Ethan raised a hand gently. Stop. The room went still. Ethan's voice remained calm, but there was something firm beneath it now. This isn't about mistakes, he said. Mistakes can be fixed. The manager swallowed. Then what is it about? Ethan leaned forward slightly. It's about hiding them. A long pause. Because when people are too afraid to speak up, problems don't just grow. He held the manager's gaze. They spread. The weight of those words filled the room. Ethan sat back. We're going to fix this. Together. The manager blinked, confused. You're not firing me? Ethan shook his head. Not for failing, a bit. But if you create an environment where others are afraid to tell the truth, his voice didn't need to rise, then you won't have a place here. The message was clear, not harsh but undeniable. That night Ethan stood once again by the window, the city glowing beneath him. The journey had brought him far, further than anyone had expected, but something inside him knew. This was only the beginning of a much larger battle, because changing a company was one thing. But changing the way people think, the way they treat each other, the way they see value, that was something else entirely. And as Ethan looked out into the endless lights of the city, he understood one simple truth. The world that once called him a failure was still full of people just like him, waiting, struggling, trying to prove that they were enough. The thought stayed with Ethan long after the lights in the building began to dim. The world that once called him a failure was still full of people like him. And for the first time, he realized something deeper. His story wasn't rare. It was everywhere, hidden in quiet struggles, buried in unheard voices, silenced by fear. The next morning, Ethan didn't go straight to his office. Instead, he walked to the lowest floor of the building, the maintenance level. The same place where he used to clock in every night, unnoticed, invisible. The same old locker room was still there. The worn benches, the faint smell of cleaning supplies, the hum of fluorescent lights. For a moment he just stood there, remembering. Then the door creaked open, and a young boy no older than 19 walked in, wearing a janitor's uniform. He froze when he saw Ethan. "Oh, I'm sorry, sir, I didn't know anyone was." Ethan shook his head gently. "It's okay." The boy looked confused, unsure whether to stay or leave. "What's your name?" Ethan asked. "Daniel," he replied nervously. Ethan nodded. "How long have you been working here, Daniel?" 3 months. Ethan could see it in his eyes, the same uncertainty, the same quiet doubt. "Do you like it?" Ethan asked. Daniel hesitated. "It's a job," he said carefully. Ethan smiled slightly. "Yeah, I used to say the same thing." Daniel looked up, confused again. "You used to?" Ethan stepped a little closer, his voice calm. "I started here too, same uniform, same floors." Daniel blinked, trying to process it. "But you're the owner," Ethan finished simply. The room fell silent. Daniel's eyes widened, disbelief written all over his face. "That's not possible." Ethan let out a soft breath. "That's what everyone else thought too." For a moment neither of them spoke. Then Ethan said something quietly, but with weight. "Don't let where you start decide where you end." Daniel didn't respond immediately. But something in his expression changed. A small shift, a spark, and sometimes that's all it takes. Weeks turned into months. The company began to transform, not overnight, not perfectly, but steadily. Productivity improved. Not because people were forced to work harder, but because they finally felt like they mattered. Ideas started flowing from places no one had ever looked before. Departments that once operated in silence now collaborated. And slowly, Harrison Company rose again, not just in profit but in purpose. One afternoon, Ethan received a message. Jonathan Harrison had made a decision. When Ethan met him again, Jonathan looked different, not weaker, not defeated, just real. "I'll stay," Jonathan said, "if the offer still stands." Ethan nodded. "It does." Jonathan took a breath. "But not as who I was." Ethan's expression softened slightly. "That's the point." And just like that, a man who once led with pride began learning humility, not easily, not quickly, but honestly. Time passed. 1 year later, the company hosted its largest annual gathering. But this time, it wasn't just executives sitting in the front rows. Every employee was invited. Every level, every voice. Ethan stood on the stage again. But this time, something was different. He didn't look like a man trying to prove something. He looked like a man who already knew. The room was filled with hundreds of people, all watching him, waiting. Ethan took a slow breath. "I want to tell you something," he began. His voice wasn't loud, but it didn't need to be. Not about business, not about success. A pause. "I want to tell you about a boy." The room grew still. A boy who couldn't read properly, who got laughed at, who was told he would never become anything. Ethan's eyes moved slowly across the crowd. That boy believed it for a long time. Silence deepened, but one person didn't. His voice softened. "My mother." Somewhere in the audience, Maria sat quietly, tears already forming in her eyes. "She told me something I didn't understand back then," Ethan continued. "She said, 'The world hasn't seen your strength yet.'" A long pause. I didn't believe her. His voice dropped slightly, until I had no choice but to try. The room felt heavier now, more personal. Success didn't come fast, it didn't come easy, and it didn't come without pain. Ethan's expression hardened, slightly, not with anger but with truth. But it came, a beat, and when it did, I realized something important. He looked directly at the crowd. Success isn't about proving others wrong. Another pause. It's about proving to yourself that you are never what they said you were. No one moved, no one spoke, because everyone in some way felt that. Ethan stepped forward slightly. So if you're sitting here today feeling unseen, unheard, underestimated. His voice became quieter but stronger. Don't stop. A long silence followed. Because the world doesn't decide your worth. His final words settled into the room like something permanent. You do? For a moment, nothing happened. Then someone stood up, then another and another, until the entire room rose to its feet, not just in applause, but in understanding, in connection, in something deeper than success. Ethan looked out at them, at the people who were once invisible, just like him, and for the first time, he didn't see a crowd. He saw stories. And now, whoever you are, wherever you are, if you've ever been called, not enough, if you've ever doubted yourself because the world made you feel small, remember this: the place you start does not define where you can go.